All right, today on Meet the Neighborhood, we talk with artist, mom, photographer, singer, actor, whale artist. Have I missed anything?
Oh, I mean, only the things that maybe I didn't want you to say out loud.
Feral dog mom.
Yes,
Does
yes.
that count? Lee Higginson is our guest today, and she's got a hilarious dog named Jeff Lebowski. There's.
Okay.
Please tell everybody why you named him Jeff Lebowski.
Because The Big Lebowski is, for me, the movie that you can go back to forever and ever, pick it up at literally any point in the movie. It doesn't matter when. It's just this series of vignettes that will always entertain me. And when I saw his face and his beard and just, his demeanor, like, look at this guy, right? Like, is that not the dude right there?
He's pretty adorable. And after having spent some time at the dog park with him, his personality matches.
Yeah, well, I also think that like man names or human names for dogs is the funniest thing. So
we have dear friends of ours who they have a pig that their son brought home, and it's a mini pig. He's like 20 pounds, and his name's Mark.
Mark, yeah. Well, the people at the pet store told me that there's another dog in town named Kevin Bacon. So they're like, oh, it's Jeff Lebowski. Maybe he'll meet Kevin Bacon. See, that's just funny, right?
We were at the dog park one time, and this lady was yelling Dave across the park, and we thought she was yelling for her husband, and all of a sudden this dog comes bounding out of the woods, and it's their dog Dave. You're right.
I'm very easily amused. So
our meathead's name is Jack. So
yeah, Jack and Jeff. They were instant friends when they met, right? They were.
Our Jack's a bit of a tool, though.
Yeah, but he taught this guy how to play fetch that day. Do you remember? It was the first time.
A little bit, yeah. A little bit. Let's start off with this is one of those get to know you things for people that have never met Lee Higginson. They don't know much about you. They or maybe just getting to know about you now and your art and your business side of what you do in life. Two truths and a lie. You can go first. I have to figure out what the lie is. Now, you probably have led a way more interesting life than me. I'm gonna have trouble with this.
No, I was, like I told you, I feel like I've struggled with my creativity, so I have quite a boring list for you, but they all are plausible. So I'm giving you a challenge.
Okay. Let her rip.
Number one, I lived in Montana for a school year.
Okay.
Number two, I have Scandinavian roots.
Okay.
And number three, I've traveled to Alaska to see the Northern Lights.
I'm going to say Montana.
No, Montana's true.
Haven't
been to Alaska.
You haven't been to Alaska? Although I think I could see you on a crab fishing boat.
I'd go on any kind of adventure up there, I'm sure.
Oh, it'd be beautiful.
Scandinavian roots, I put that in only because I just did my DNA over the winter, and this doesn't speak highly in terms of my understanding of my last name, which is Higginson, which by anyone's imagination would be a Scandinavian name. But I was always told my family came from Northern Ireland, which they did. It took till literally this point in my life to understand that the Higginsons were immigrants from Norway. I didn't know.
See, I would have pegged that no problem.
See, it was just a block in my head, like Irish and Scottish. That's it.
Have you looked in the mirror before? Because there's some Scandinavian appearance to you. This does not look Scandinavian.
Yeah. No, I didn't know. I just didn't know.
All right. Here's my three. Spot the lie. Two truths and a lie.
For a minute here.
I once had beers with Marty McSorley, the guy in the painting behind me there fighting.
Yeah. Okay.
Where he regaled me on the financial escapades behind the scenes of the Phoenix Coyotes and the scandal involving Gary Bettman from the NHL. Number two, I once broke my arm on the Tilt-A-Whirl at the Peterborough X.
Oh dear.
And number three, in high school, I won a lip sync contest singing Pour Some Sugar on Me with Def Leppard.
Oh my God, I want that one to be true so much. I'm hoping it's the broken arm because I want the other two to be true.
It's the broken arm.
Yes.
Totally the broken arm. Although I did sell pizzas at the Peterborough X one summer in deck ovens when I worked at Mother's Pizza, and the deck ovens were there when it was like 300 degrees out, and nearly died of dehydration. So
Right.
um,
Yeah.
who was Lee Higginson in high school? Where you were a St. Pete's girl, right?
St. Pete's, old St. Pete's though.
Old
Not
school St. Pete's.
old, yes, downtown old St. Pete's.
Who were some of the crowd that you ran with back in that day?
Oh my goodness.
People may know.
People may know. I mean, I had a wide circle of people that I connected with, but I was lucky enough to be involved in some of the musical theater productions that we had in the school, and so I got to spend kind of a good chunk of a year with Jerry Allen, who is just a legendary teacher and educator there, and had this really fun family of students that we like. Paul Crow, who I think is actually, if he's not a St. Pete's teacher, he's the other, whatever the other Catholic school is that evolved up there, and Chris Harrington and Brian Harrington, who's a doctor up there. And we had that was just a really kind of fun memory on that. And I also was the first graduating French immersion class in Peterborough.
Okay.
So I was the first class that started, and there was a really tight knit group of just a couple dozen. Actually, it was even less than that. It was kind of, 15 of us, I think, who kind of went through that program. So
have you held on to your French?
Yeah, a little bit, but mostly because I worked in Ottawa and did my education in French afterwards, and then spent a good part of my adulthood up there maintaining it. So I can still do it. It's not great. I wouldn't want to go on national TV or anything, but it's all still lodged in there.
You wouldn't feel comfy in the House of Commons answering French questions?
Probably not. I mean, although I could probably still hold my own against some of the people who respond in French up there.
So with that crowd, you were sort of part of the theater crowd. Coming out of high school, what was your chosen path? Where did you want to end up? What did you see yourself doing?
We were just, before we started this recording, we were talking about the OAC system and how we used to have 5 years of high school, which I still really support, and I'm really glad that we had that. But I would say, despite the fact that I had 5 years to kind of plan, and I had that extra year that kids have now, I don't think I really knew where I was headed at that point, because in the 90s, when I was graduating and moving on to post-secondary, there was an absolute run on getting into teachers college. It was it was the most cutthroat thing you could do, kind of like just really difficult to get in. And I think I had thought that education was my path, and I couldn't get in. So I went off to Ottawa without any, with just kind of a language course of action, and completed that, but without any real mission in terms of what would come after it at that point.
Do you think in today's day and age, with the price of post-secondary and the way that the career opportunities have changed for today's generation, do you think kids are still doing that? Where you kind of, because
I don't know why they would. I mean, I don't,
like the object back then was you had to go to school, you had to get an education. Didn't matter what it was, you just had to have the ticket, right? Because somehow the ticket had some value, and it would lead to better things. And I still don't think that's a bad thing. I just think that the return on investment these days for some of the post-secondary courses, it gets tough to justify.
Yeah, well, and back to the point that now we are having students, not now, I mean, I get that it's been decades, but kids heading off and making those choices when they're very young, like actually still children, and then going off to invest in 3, 4, and 5 years of education without, that would set them to graduate at what I consider them to be still very young.
Yeah.
I will support my kids in terms of how they want to process that, but my thinking is that practical skills is certainly a better route at this point, unless you have an incredibly specific plan in terms of the career you are heading for that has a direct route. But this, to me, the whole kind of generalized arts degree is simply you paying a lot to put in time so that you can process what you actually want to do with your life.
Yeah, that's a really eloquent way of sort of summing it up. And I think any education is an investment. I don't care if it's college, university, technical courses, online courses, any education is an investment. I think though the difference between when we were kids and kids today is they have to weigh the return on that investment, because the price they pay or could be paying long term is way more difficult than it ever was for us. Like coming out
Well,
of
our
school
tuition was
second,
under $3,000, Joel, when we went. Like it
I
was
know, and now it's 40,
grand a
50,
year, right?
$60,000 depending on the program, right? And
So
that's a massive investment to make to be able to start a career. Because the crazy thing is, like, most of us change careers 3 or 4 times, right? So it's a good starting point. And like I said, I don't think there's no such thing as bad education, but I do think you have to weigh the investment versus what the payoff is down the road, and what direction you want to steer yourself in. Because
well, I think that there's at least even odds that you will have changed careers while you are still paying off what you paid for your first investment, right? So
correct.
um, I'm a huge fan at this point, and particularly, and I don't want to generalize because there's lots of incredibly bright teenagers out there who actually seem more worldly and kind of connected in many ways than I am now as an adult. But that being said, if I got to make the call, I would say that um, you need to go off and live practical life and gain some skills and some work and everything, and actually, don't start your education until you're 21 or 22.
I was really happy when my son took a gap year this year, especially during COVID. He was supposed to go off, and he's been working for the last year, and it's just given him a whole different perspective. And he's going to school in September, but
Yeah.
things should be opened up again, so you get the full kind of experience of what he wants. And he's found a program he loves, so
Right.
and where that career path goes. So I want to talk a little bit about your art, because your social media feeds are just a treat to the eyeballs every single day, it seems like. And I have no idea where you come up with this. I would love a tour through your brain.
I don't know. Don't say that.
But I'm always fascinated how you can take stuff that we walk past every day, or step over or ignore, or just not even on our radar, and you turn it into these magnificent creations that have incredible community symbolism, symbolism involving the pandemic, involving your kids. Like, where does that sort of thought process start for you?
I mean, it starts decades ago in terms of just being born and having that kind of perspective. I grew up in an incredibly creative family, and it wasn't until I was an adult that I realized that I grew up in a creative family, because when it's just all around you, you just think that's normal and that's how everyone processes things. Like
Right.
I grew up part-time, kind of off-grid and north of Buckhorn and on the Kawartha Lakes up there, when it really was remote.
Yeah.
We didn't have roads to it. You had to, like, there's no phone up there. You had to wave a sheet at the end of the lake so that the person at the cottage knew to come in the boat and get you. Like, no plumbing, no electricity, nothing. And when you are put into a situation as a child and as a teen where that is part of your existence, then you really rely on your imagination and your creativity to entertain you, and you rely on nature to be your medium. So, my grandfather is a photographer. My parents are both photographers and very, very good. So it just seemed like it was just a guarantee. It was kind of a given that would be the way that my existence kind of rolled out.
And has art always been sort of because you've managed to turn it into a business and a career, and has that always been the thinking, or was there a career before you sort of morphed into art full time, or have you been doing art the whole time?
I mean, I've always done art, and I certainly never considered it to be a path that I would call a career. And I don't even know if I still call it a career, because I don't know what what the definition is. I mean, I certainly do it full time,
Right.
but in terms of, if we were talking finances, you certainly wouldn't say in the last 12 months that it was a supporting.
Take the 12 months past to take COVID out of this, because that blew everything up for everybody.
We can't talk artists in COVID. We can't talk about that. But I, when my kids were young, it certainly was the way we kind of grew up together, and it's always been a part of it. But it wasn't until my marriage ended and I kind of looked around and I thought, so here you go, you're back at ground zero, you're starting over, you're rebuilding, like what do you want that to look like? And I knew that I wanted to push that part of me into the forefront for the first time, because it was really the kind of the first point in my adult life where I could just straight up focus on the me in the whole factor. So
Funny how that works at a separation, right?
yeah, well, I mean, my ex is a very talented and a well-known writer in his field, and during our marriage, it was an understanding that we'd made long before, that if he was going to be gone kind of 100 days a year while he was traveling and working, that when you have small children at home, like somebody has to take on that role. And I have zero regrets about that being my choice to invest in at that level.
And well, with your ex-husband being a writer and you being an artist, it's inevitable that that's going to rub off on the kids, and the kids have got an art bent to them as well, because they're included in most of your projects.
Yeah, whether they want to or not, because
right.
like people always say, oh, you're doing such a good job and they're such creative kids, but I'm like, you understand they're 13 and 15-year-old boys. Like, it's not like they're just jolly, like throwing their things on and following me out of the house like what do you do. Like, there is a lot of parental encouragement at this point. Exactly, like we know what it's like, hey, do you want to come with mom and build something at the beach, or do you want to stay here and like play Fortnite? Like, it's not it's at this point, it does require me to strong arm somewhat, but it's the way we've grown up, and I know that when you get involved and when you get down there, that it's always that kind of blissful moment where they can be involved and help create something and kind of grow to understand the importance of leaving your mark in kind of interesting ways on the world.
Well, then you start to see it in them, right? And then
well, you hope. I know I'm right in that pocket of that parenting time where you just kind of sometimes just quietly say to yourself, like, I do hope that they will come back again in that kind of sweet, loving way.
right.
I adore them, but I this is always an interesting process for anyone. And when you add autism to puberty and you create that interesting cocktail, then it's a daily adventure.
Well, Sam and Charlie are both incredibly unique young men in their own ways. Tell us a little bit about each of these young men, because I've only met them through their social media channels and some of the remarkable things they've done with you. But who are these young men in their own sort of view and voice? Like, because they're very separate individual guys.
You aren't kidding. Yeah. They are almost to the day 2 years apart, and they are absolute polar opposites in every way. So I do feel like, even though I did not have a daughter, I certainly have the full range of experience in terms of personality and type. But when they were very, very young, I kind of called them, the professor and the party boy. Like, there's just, Charlie is, I could do hours and hours just talking about what it is to be given the opportunity to raise somebody who is an entirely unique creation. Like, there's nothing that is more challenging and more fascinating than raising somebody who lives on a different plane. Charlie he struggles in many, many ways to fit into this world and fit into what people deem normal and the parameters inside of what is acceptable. But when I'm trying to be concise about it, I say Charlie lives entirely in this moment. So Charlie does not carry with him anything that has happened to him before. And Charlie doesn't spend a single ounce of his time worrying about what's coming down the road. And so in this kind of Buddha-esque kind of way, he is literally sitting in the moment he is in at any given time. And, all these people, they're like, oh, I'm sorry, your son has autism, all this stuff. And I say, like, he is living the ideal that we as middle-aged people kind of come to an awareness that we're trying to find. Like we're trying to get to this point that he lives naturally.
Well, you posted I don't know if it was a letter or if it was a post of him around his 15th birthday where he talked about what it was like for him having autism. And it was so profound. There was a couple things that stuck out in that post. One of them was, and it's almost, and I think from an artist perspective, you may appreciate this much more than we do, but everything to him is brighter, louder, like sensations seem to be amplified for him. Is that fair?
Oh yeah, definitely.
And that he remembers every moment of everything that's ever happened to him.
Yeah, pure.
Like a photographic memory. And then he said reading a book for him is like a vacation because it shuts out he doesn't hear or see anything around him when he's reading. It's just he's on vacation in the book. And I think it was just such a profound description of what his daily experience was like. And it gave me a real insight into what he goes through on a daily basis. Because he also said he would talk to his younger self and say, hey, there's some hard days ahead coming in school, but you're a pretty amazing individual. And he like patted himself on the back and said, you're going to get through it. And I was like, okay, I need Kleenex. This is getting too much. Like,
but he doesn't do it. He would never say anything. He doesn't understand like emotional manipulation. He understands that he can ask me to try and, he understands the concept of manipulation. But in terms of that, he would never think that anyone would respond emotionally to that, because to him, that is just the truth.
Right.
Like he doesn't understand that anyone would think anything other than that is your truth and good for you, like the end. Like,
but isn't that sort of isn't that kind of innocence and virtue, like at its core?
Absolutely. Like, there's no question. He lives without ego, and he lives without the idea that doesn't believe in authority, which makes it sound like he's an anarchist, and he is in his own way. He's just a very peaceful version of it. But to him, the power of, say, a principal at a school telling him something is no more valuable than that guy he saw like lying on the street who told him something. Like he truly perceives all humans at exactly the same level and doesn't
equality.
Total equality.
That's fascinating.
Said, insects rate way above humans, like all in, so the humans are equal, but they're like here.
Yeah.
And then there's like all of the other creatures.
But he's got a point though, because let's be honest, if insects were the size of us, we don't stand a chance.
He tells me often how outnumbered we are by them.
Has he delved into the cicadas yet, and the 17 billion cicadas coming back?
He knows everything about everything. But
that's awesome. And where does Sam fit into all this, and how does he relate to Charlie as a brother and sort of in school life and that, and what's sort of the machinations of that for Sam?
I mean, it's very interesting because a lot of the reasons that I understood that Charlie, with him being firstborn, it took Sam coming along and seeing his markers and seeing his timelines on how he grew and how he evolved to realize, oh wow, like Charlie didn't do any of that. Sometimes you have to have, like a so-called normal come along after to kind of make you realize, whoa, like, what do you know as a first-time parent? Nothing, right? So the second one sometimes teaches you a lot about the first. And Sam came out just guns blazing. Like he has been the kind of kid who has walked with a swagger that tells me he's ready for the world since he was a toddler. Brilliant kid, was reading reading out of a book when he was 3, just an absolute genius. And he's kind of a lot of me in a way that I'm now paying for slightly in terms of the sass and the verbal ways of convincingly argue everything in the world. So.
I think our parents call that karma.
Yeah, he is my.
That's karma coming back.
Charlie is my lessons, and Sam is my karma, and they're both absolutely fantastic. So.
That is such a cool way to describe it. I want to go back to sort of art and where this is fit into the pandemic, because I think the pandemic has amplified so many different, or shone a light on so many different parts of our societies. And one of the big things you hear people commenting about, I can't wait to get back to live music. I can't wait to get to the theater. I can't wait to go out just to get out into a gallery, because people are realizing how much of a role art plays in our life.
Yeah.
Whether it's visual art, theater, recorded music, whatever it is, that missing element of art. And I think you've sort of done a really good job of bringing that to the forefront kind of over and over again through your Instagram and your social media feeds. Because I think it's become an outlet and a perspective check for people. Like whenever I see something from you that you've posted, there's always kind of a message tied to it, which I think is what good art does. And you did one a couple weeks ago with the discovery of the indigenous kids in Kelowna and with the feathers. And it was just so profound, but it was so simple. And I'm wondering what kind of feedback you get from that during people through the pandemic, or if you've gotten any feedback on sort of art being taken out of society.
Well, I mean, at the base, all of this, everything I create is a release for me. So everything I create is just because it's there, and it needs to come out in some way visually. So whether I'm taking a picture or whether I'm building something on the beach, or that piece that you referenced, the 215, it's just kind of a way to diffuse. So for me, the art that I have created has primarily been for a therapeutic process for me in what I consider a really, really hard time, for every artist I know, and certainly, a financially challenging time, for me and for others who have relied on that. But the feedback, of course, is quite amazing, and particularly on that piece. I made it because I couldn't shake the horror that I was feeling for about those children's bodies discoveries, and then deeper into, why don't I know this? And, thinking about my Catholic education, and thinking about the fact that, this is not news to people who live in these communities. Like, they know this and we don't. And our education, certainly when you get to my age, is when you look back, like, it's quite horrifying, really, like the whitewashed version of our country's history that we were taught, and that is kind of in there as a baseline of our understanding. So that piece kind of just, it generated, and it just happened, and I literally just sat and cut those feathers out by hand, one at a time. And then when I made it, I really hesitated to post it because I don't want there to be another white person making a comment, a blasé kind of comment on this situation. But I hope that I framed it well enough to say that I'm acknowledging, my lack of understanding in the situation. And the feedback was enormous. I mean, I think it reached, I have no idea, some ridiculous number. It was shared a couple hundred times and moved on. And actually it's going to live in a public space in Port Hope, to be on a more public display. I had someone reach out and request it. So when that gets put up, I will post about that and just say it's nice to have some more eyeballs on it. Just
you said a couple of things in there that really have resonated in our house anyway. And there's the education system that we grew up in, didn't tell us any of this stuff. And the most I can remember is doing a project on Louis Riel in, I think, grade 6. But he was positioned as a rebellionist and someone that was anti-establishment and had to be taken care of. Mm-hmm. And then, but the second part of me is, as much as I feel disappointed in not knowing all of this stuff, the second part of me, when the Truth and Reconciliation Commission came out, I don't remember a whole lot about it, but like all of this information that we're finding out now was in that report. Mm-hmm. And it baffles me that it wasn't a bigger deal at the time, that we have sites all over Canada where there's just unmarked graves of children all over the place. And I think as a country, I think it's caused everybody to step back and go, who are we? Like, what? Right. We're not who we think we are. And it's caused a profound conversation, I think, with a number of people. We've had some interesting chats in the house here because, my wife and I felt the same way. Like, part of me feels cheated that this was never part of our discussion and that it was going on until the mid-90s.
Yeah.
And we didn't know that. And
we were in school,
Well, and I don't know. I can't imagine what it would be like to be part of the Indigenous community, because like there is no fix. There's no answer. I don't know how you make good on this. I don't know how you grow from this moving forward. And I think whoever is driving the bus for our government, for the churches, frankly, and for the Indigenous communities, I don't know what that's going to look like moving forward, because everybody has to move forward and kind of learn from this, so that obviously it never happens again. But it was, I don't know, it's your artwork when it came out. And I talked to my friend, I posted a thing for my friend Murray Henderson too, who's also an artist. Same deal. As an artist, he just couldn't keep it in. He had to put something on paper to symbolize how he was feeling about this whole thing. And I think that's where art comes in, because that's where you guys play a huge role in how we process information like this. Because it does feel like it just feels like the foundation's been kicked out from underneath you in some way.
Yeah, our home and native land, right?
Right. Well,
Like
yeah, you sum it up in one sentence.
Yeah, there was some kind of, I don't even know, like a declaration by one of the politicians about their sadness and about all of this stuff, and literally it was immediately followed by the anthem where they're singing our home and native land. And it's,
nobody thought to check that.
Well, whatever, I just hope that it's something that remains in the conversation and isn't one of these, like that one school that happened, and then every other time this happens, there's like a cultural blasé about it because it's all been said and done, and they've already, I just hope that this stays at the forefront of discussion going forward, and that it changes the path of how we think about our history and the way our country was built.
Well, and understanding why people in the Indigenous communities, why some of them are living the way they're living today. Like, you've got decades and decades of trauma layered on top of there that we have no concept of. And like I said, I'm not sure how you heal from that moving forward, but it certainly has changed the way our country thinks about itself and the way we think about our Indigenous communities, for sure. So speaking of communities, you are a strident, diehard flag waver of Port Hope.
Yes.
Which I love. What is it about your community? Because it is different from every other community around here. There's something special about Port Hope. How would you sort of put that in a nutshell?
Oh my. I mean, when I moved here, so I'm almost 11 years here, which is remarkable because it just happens kind of quickly. And when we signed the papers on buying a house in Port Hope, our realtor said, welcome to the open asylum. And that was my greeting. That was literally my first moment as an official Port Hoper, which is, I love that story. But it's, there's something very concentrated about the quirky, eccentric artiness of Port Hope that doesn't really exist elsewhere. Like there's a real passion about maintaining the small town feeling and avoiding kind of the big box culture here. In addition to people who have, I mean, I don't know what the percentage is, but certainly, you work in the real estate realm kind of to some extent. And it's, the turnover since I've been here is massive. Like, I have to think that there's a massive percentage of people who have been here for less than 10 years, right? So the concept of Port Hoper is a very loose thing, because there's certainly generations of families who've been here, but there's also like a hearty half of the population who would be considered to be new or relatively new. But people continue to come here because it is the kind of community you can walk into and you can start up a really wacky business, or you can live openly and free in whatever kind of way you want to, and without kind of any feeling that there's going to be judgment or that you're going to run into any difficulties that way. So I think it's just an inclusive feel, that you're crazy and you're eccentric and your wackiness is not just accepted, but welcomed.
That's a really great way of putting it.
Maybe we should put that on like the sign.
Can we put that on the welcome sign? Yeah. We love your crazy.
Yeah. Super love
Um,
it. Like, bring it on.
what are you looking forward to most about reopening?
Oh, well, I I mean, so many things, and you've already touched on it. I mean, I think that artists have felt like, of all realms, that we have been told that our work is inessential. Like the first thing that was kind of gone was this whole idea, like, no, you can't go see music. Like, no, you can't go see art. No, you can't gather and do this. Um, so kind of recapturing that idea, like you said, that is what everyone has lacked, and that's what everyone has missed. There was a day, we had that kind of pocket of being open last summer, and there was a day at the Ganny in the back patio where Jimmy Boskill backed his truck up to the edge of the patio and stood on the back of his truck and played his guitar. And it was like my happiest moment of last year, because it felt like normal, and it felt like, and that's kind of really what I look forward to, is those moments of community and song and gathering and all of those things.
Going back to your description of Port Hope, is there any other community in Canada where a national treasure guitar player, blues legend,
Yeah.
shows up and backs his truck up to play guitar? Like, does that happen anywhere else in Canada?
Not that I know of. I mean, that, like, yeah, he blows my mind. He's astounding, and he always kind of rolls with the most amazing people. And you have, when I think about Cultivate, I did a little project with Cultivate, like a downtown kind of local giveaway post a couple of weeks ago, and I've got one of their herb boxes, the community garden ones, in my front yard, and I can't wait for Cultivate and for things like that to be a part of this town again, because
Mm.
those to me are the quintessential moments of why this town is so amazing.
Cultivate has turned into one of the focal points of the festival community, not just in Port Hope, but around here. And Jeff Bray and his team have done such an amazing job of growing that, because it grew really fast.
Yeah, really fast.
But
And also maintaining the interest in these hard times, and kind of keeping the name on people's minds still, even though it can't operate in its way. I have nothing but good things to say about that team. They're truly amazing.
my introduction to flute craft was my wife coming home with some Christmas decorations that you made out of driftwood that still to this day hang on our Christmas tree. And I've had a fascination with your artwork ever since. And I'm wondering, for people that want to check out more of that stuff, um, it's tough when the pandemic has locked everything down, but where's the best place for people to find your art, find you, and maybe reach out? Because I love the fact that in the past year and a half or 2 years now, people are now commissioning your artwork because they want your creativity as part of their space. And I love the work that you did for the Beamish last week.
That was
with,
amazing.
tell us a little bit about how did that come about? Because again, it's fish swimming upstream on some picnic tables, and it's so unique, and it's so Flute Craft and Lee Higginson.
Yeah, somebody said to me they walked by, and they would, even if I hadn't put my name on it, they would have instantly known that was my art, which is amazing. I mean, that's like the best possible thing you could hear. But I mean, that was a very, like, back to the quirkiness of Port Hope, like the evolution of how that happened was hysterically local. Like, I think
Jeff
Jessica,
Lebowski-esque.
yeah, Jess posted something about her new tables, I think, and then Sean Carthew, who is like the art manager of Port Hope unofficially, I think he literally tagged me in the post and said, "Hey Lee, you should go paint those tables," and that was it. Like, hey, that'd be great. Okay, let's do it. So yeah, so I spent 3 days last week down there, sitting in the Beamish backyard, as we call it, down on the grass, and painted those tables out. And I had a peanut gallery from up above of all of the Beamish regulars kind of hollering over their suggestions to me while I was working on it.
Did the ghost of Farley Mowat speak to you at all?
Pretty much, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's in there. Everyone can go find themselves amongst the school
Oh
of
my
fish.
God, that's awesome.
That's just pure. And it was kind of, I haven't made permanent art basically for quite a long time, and I certainly have been on hiatus, I would call it. So the idea of making something permanent and visible and there was kind of my relaunch, I'll call it. So
And we can't wait to get back to the real world. So
Right.
if people want to check out your stuff, tell them where your Instagram is. Your Facebook, you're just Lee Higginson, but where's your Instagram feed?
I have a Facebook page for Flukecraft and an Instagram page for Flukecraft. So those are the most up-to-date kind of ways to find me. And very soon I am going to open the doors on a little quirky art space I have downtown Port Hope. Finally, I hope. Every time I say this, I feel like the world gets locked down again, but I will have an in-person space at downtown Port Hope again, starting very soon. And I look forward to seeing people's faces and hopefully taking some pictures. I pledged after my delightful friend Oliver Steins died in March. He's just an artist that I value and admire so much. And he always had a little photo booth set up in his art and framing store. And it was like people would come along and he would just, without warning, kind of do their portrait. And so I'm hoping to honor him to create a space like that in downtown Port Hope so that I can kind of keep that tradition alive. So come by and I'll take your picture, Joel, and you can start the whole trend.
My giant head won't fit in the frame, I guarantee it. You're going to need a wide angle lens. Lee Higginson, thank you for your inspiration. Thank you for your art and your vulnerability, and your community messaging is probably maybe the best way you could put it. I know it sounds kind of marketing like to say that, but you've become such a part of the fabric of Port Hope. And I think your art speaks for the way a lot of people think. And I think we're all grateful for that. And we can't wait to go check out your new space, my friend. Thanks for the time today.
Thank you very much for having me. It was delightful.